All right, good evening everybody and welcome to the Woodlands Community Centre. I've just got a few housekeeping rules before we start. We're not expecting a fire alarm to sound this evening, but if it does, would you please leave the building through the fire exits just behind you, and officers will show you where to stand. Now, we always welcome people to come and speak at our meetings. And although this is a formal committee meeting, obviously Borough Councils, Bishopstoke, Berwick, Horton, Heath Local Area Committee, it's not a public meeting. And therefore, members of the public that have registered to speak will be invited on the relevant item and will be given a total of 3 minutes to address the committee. When the light reaches amber, you will have 30 seconds remaining. People wishing to speak on an item agenda are able to do so before the debate starts, but please be aware that once the debate has started, it is not possible for us to take further comment or questions from the floor. We want to be inclusive as possible, but we will not tolerate any disruptions to our meetings. Should there be any disruptions, we do have the power under the Council's constitution to remove people from the meeting. Neither of which we would take lightly or wish to do. Councillors are reminded that to take part in this meeting you must have an open mind so that you can take all the relevant considerations presented to you at this meeting into account in reaching your decision. By attending today, you have decided that you will listen to all the points of views expressed by the speakers, the public, and you are able to participate and cannot be seen to have predetermined any application. This meeting will be recorded and it will be uploaded to the Council's website. If anybody, any members of the public would prefer not to be recorded, then do please contact a member of staff. If you are planning on filming or recording the meeting, do let us know so we can ensure you are not filming members of the public that do not wish to be. If there is any intrusive filming, we can ask for it to be stopped, and more information is available on the Council's website. That's a formal bit, and we'll get that out of the way.
My husband's due to speak, and he's registered blind. I don't think he'll see your lights.
I will let you. That's not a problem at all, and I will let you know. I will shout 30. I do tend to. I'm quite relaxed and I do tend to let people know, so don't panic about the lights, that's not a problem at all.
What's that oi? That's just oi.
I'm great with the word oi, I can cope with oi, so that's perfect, thank you everybody. Okay, so now we will, without further ado, get into the meeting. So, the first item is apologies. I've received one apology so far, which is Councillor Marsh. Have we heard any others? Thank you very much. Item 2 is public participation, and I believe everybody who wishes to participate is registered under specific items today. Okay. Item 3 is declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations of interest they may wish to make? If so, please indicate now, or when called, please state the nature of that reason. You can, of course, declare any interest as they occur to you during the meeting. Nobody's indicating? Great, we'll go on to the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 29th of November. Can I now approve these as a true record? Do I have a proposer? Cllr Broomfield and a seconder, that was Councillor Caws. Thank you very much. All in favour, all agreeing? Excellent. Thank you, councillors. Item 5 is my chair's report. Firstly, I'd like to start by thanking Councillor Tidridge for so ably stepping in as chair at the previous meeting following my injury. It was very much appreciated, and I'm sure she did a really good job, and that you're all now disappointed to have me back here. Earlier this week, 2 of the council's new directors received a tour around Bishopstoke and Berwick and were shown areas of interest that obviously all of this committee are keen to ensure move forward. It's really disappointing to hear that the allotments and other community assets are still not being passed over, and a lot of the trouble with this happening is down to developers not wishing to put themselves forward for it. So this is frustrating, and I know it is frustrating officers as well. We also looked at some of the projects which we have funded, for example, the Lapstone cricket wicket. I'm sure you'll all be pleased to know that it is being taken very seriously, the delay in all the asset transfers. Members, I would like, with your permission, to rearrange our agenda slightly, as we have various people that would like to speak on items 9 and 10, the two planning applications. Would you mind if I moved us to item 8 immediately, which would be the presentation on planning guidelines, and then the subsequent items, and then we will go back to items 6 and 7 after we've dealt with those matters. All members agree? Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. So, item 8 is the presentation on planning guidelines, and I will ask Gary. Yeah, I'll ask Gary to present. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members, good evening. Quick presentation on planning guidelines for this evening's two items. Proposals must be considered on planning grounds, and they must be determined in line with the adopted development plan unless there are material considerations which indicate otherwise. The adopted plan is the Eastleigh Borough Local Plan 2016 to 36 and the Hampshire Minerals and Waste Plan, which won't be relevant to either of tonight's items. In terms of relevant considerations, as well as the plan, there's any adopted supplementary planning documents and guidance, such as the quality places, parking standards, etc., and relevant government policy, including the National Planning Policy Framework, which has a presumption in favour of sustainable development. This was most recently updated in December last year, and where relevant will take precedent over the development plan where the two are not in accordance with each other. In terms of the National Planning Policy Framework, or NPPF, so it has a number of requirements set out there, and as I said, there's a presumption in favour of sustainable development which has 3 threads in terms of economic, social and environmental. And according to the NPPF, for a development to be sustainable, it needs to meet all 3 of those elements. They are mutually supportive and can't be taken individually. In terms of other material considerations, site planning history or previous applications or decisions, any relevant appeal decisions, or site-specific policies or matters such as highways, amenity, infrastructure, etc. Any consultee and third-party comments or any precedent, i.e. case law, which relates to how applications should be determined. Any non-planning related issues, moral, racial or religious views, devaluation or otherwise of property, loss of any private view, which is different to outlook, breach of covenants or matters covered by other legislation such as alcohol licensing or building regulations, any personal views as to the reasons for the application, or any civil matters such as boundary disputes. So, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Do any members have any questions for Gary on what you've just heard? Okay. Then without further ado, we will now go on to item 9. And I will ask, which is the planning application for Pembers Hill on Mortimer's Lane, Fair Oak, Eastleigh, SO57EA, PN 239630. And I'm going to ask Dawn to present this report.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. Yes, this is a prior approval application, so slightly different to a normal planning application in respect of process and some of the considerations. But it's a prior approval for an agricultural access from Pembers Farm Avenue from the adjoining agricultural field. So just to show you a couple of photos. So this is a view from the avenue showing the existing hedges, tree, and fence line and a view out of the residential development over the fields. The application, as I've said, is for a new vehicular access. Laser pointer up. There we go. Thank you, Carrie. So the access is shown here. It's a grass-crete construction with a field gate beyond, linking to this is Penda's Farm Avenue here, and you can see it's literally at the end of that straight road. You can see the adjoining houses here. And then we've got a more detailed plan submitted which shows vehicle tracking, because vehicles would be varied but may include a tractor and trailer. So this is showing tracking which just clips the other side of the road as it tracks over there. You can see there. Again, that's useful information submitted by the applicant. The applicant's also submitted a plan showing existing farm accesses serving the farm, which is now split in two. So the blue and red lines are the way in which the farmland's been divided, and you can see it does have various accesses, and it does also have one existing access, which I'll show you, Fieldgate, which is not currently in use, which is also fronting that fence, and new hedging has been planted on the estate. Yes, the application is it's pretty straightforward in terms of what it is. It's a field access with a standard gate. You've got all the comments and the considerations in the written report. Just to update, in terms of, since that's been published, we've had a confirmation of objection from Fair Oak Parish Council on the grounds of highway safety and not wishing the existing accesses to be used, concerns about the use in the estate. As you can see, that's the objection and fill on the screen. In terms of neighbour comments, we haven't had any further neighbour comments since the report was published last week, but residents do have until tomorrow to comment because of the site notice timing. But I have no additional comments to report as of now. So in terms of the assessment, as I mentioned, prior approvals are slightly different from normal planning applications in that the matters that can be considered are more limited. There's a general support in principle for agricultural accesses, but they do have to also be acceptable in terms of their siting and their means of construction. I don't think means of construction is an issue, but siting certainly is. Whilst there is some evidence of need for the access, and again the applicants have provided supporting information in that respect, in my view it's simply in the wrong location, routing farm traffic through a quiet residential estate. So the basic proposition isn't right for this site and this siting. That results in harmful impacts both visually and for residential amenity, as detailed in the written report. Whilst there has been some discussion on how you can control that, how you can make it acceptable, the applicant doesn't wish to have any restricted hours of operation, and although has submitted a proposal for mud controls, which would be fortnightly until the road is adopted, and then down to Hampshire County Council to clean roads, that isn't considered sufficient. A lot of concerns around the consequences of having farm vehicles through a residential estate, including muck and dust and other things generated from farm vehicles. vehicles. Really the advice from Hampshire Highways, whilst not raising a highway safety concern, is that the controls would need to be far more than that. Mud would need to be removed from roads on each occasion. As you can see from the report, we've had substantial local objection to the access because of its siting and the impacts of it. There are concerns around matters such as highway safety, but they're not supported by Hampshire County Council. Also concerns around ecology and tree, which would remain, and those again aren't supported by our technical consultees, our ecologists, or our tree officers. So there has been mixed response in terms of the application. So moving on to the recommendation, there's 2 reasons for refusal in the report. So the recommendation is to refuse prior approval, but it is also subject to consideration of any new issues. That's new issues, not repeats of the ones we've already considered, by tomorrow. And so therefore it needs to be a delegation back to the Service Director for Planning and Environment in conjunction with the Chair and Vice Chair to refuse prior approval on the basis that if anything is new is raised, then that will be considered and discussed at the end of this week. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, I'm now going to ask our speakers to come forward to talk on this. The first person I have is Ian Smorton, and if I mispronounced your surname, I'm very sorry. Please...
It's spoken some people have pronounced it in the past, so don't worry about that.
So please come forward, and you do have 3 minutes, but don't panic.
Don't worry, it's been a long day. I'm not panicking. Right, so the first objection we want to get registered is on the basis of safety. It introduces a safety risk to the estate whereby you've got traffic that is going through a quiet residential estate past a playground in the height of summer. It doesn't really make sense, really, on that basis. And that risk is already mitigated through the current access on Mortimer's Lane. So you're kind of moving the risk into an area where there's like none at the moment because it's been adequately looked after through Mortimer's Lane and the gate there. There is also in the submission a commitment that the agricultural vehicles will drive through the estate at a slow pace, which how you're going to enforce that, I really don't know. It's unenforceable to my mind. So that's the first element of the objection, is framed around safety. Why change from an arrangement that currently is working? The second part is about planning history and the time that's elapsed for this application to be made. Now, the applicant makes out that her partner, they divorced in 2010, and the business arrangement unravelled in 2018, and yet access to the field is critical to running of her business, etc. Now, the Drew Smith planning application went in 2018. Her relationship was unwinding in 2018. Surely, if this access was of a primary driver to running the business, then you would be right on top of it to ensure that you can run your business sustainably. We've now got 5 years down the line, or 6 years down the line, and now it's a pressing issue. So what I want to put out there is she could have made an expression of interest or requirement to get the planning altered in 2018, given that the plans were submitted to Eastleigh Borough Council in 2018, and now we are now 6 years later, and it's become an issue. It's not credible, and also it's undermined our search process and the conveyancing process, because she sat on information that was known to her, which should have been put out there in the public domain. Therefore, she's undermined our search process because we would have been able to done our due diligence at the time and asked further questions. And unfortunately, for me, the horse is already bolted and it's in another field. It's tough. Sorry, you should have got it in 2018. There you go.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I was just double checking because the amber light came on with a whole minute's warning.
Oh, right.
Don't fret. What I will do, because it confused me, so I thought I'd better double check. So what? And you were fine. You still had 10 seconds left. But what I will do is I will make sure that I say 30 seconds when we get to 30 seconds. But even I was like, I don't know what's going on with the IT tonight. Oh.
Yeah, so just to simply put right back, it's the point about there has to be a reasonable amount of time that is allowed to elapse in order to kind of get your request in granted. You've allowed, or that person's allowed that period of time to go through.
Yes,
Now it's supposed
thank
to
you.
just undermine it.
Yeah, we did hear that point. Thank you very much. Could I now ask Mr. Richard Chucker if he would like to come forward? Thank you very much. You will have 3 minutes. The amber light will come on a minute before the end, but I will let you know when you've got 30 seconds. Thank you.
Okay, good evening. I'd like to thank the committee and Eastleigh Borough Council for the opportunity to address the planning committee this evening, subject to the agricultural access from Pembers Farm Avenue. My name is Richard Schuker from 30 Pembers Farm Avenue, and my house is immediately adjacent to the proposed access. I was very relieved to read the planning officer's recommendations that this application be refused, and much of the reasoning I could not have worded better myself. We also have an incredible number of thoughtful and well-constructed objections from the residents of the estate that show an overwhelming unity in opposing this application, as well as the previous withdrawn application. There are many robust reasons to object, but I really want to focus on just a few areas. So firstly, safety. It's hard to imagine the British summer from the darkest depths of January, but there are a considerable number of young children living on the estate who play freely on their bikes and scooters. I have 2 young children myself who are looking forward to the new play park opening, and the thought of my kids playing on bikes and scooters on the estate near agricultural vehicles is very troubling. One of the reasons we purchased here was precisely because the estate offered a safe place for kids to grow up. This is an accident waiting to happen and easily avoided by not having agricultural vehicles near young children. Secondly, amenity. This is a well-planned and good-looking estate with pleasing views bordered with tree lines and hedgerows. We love watching the bats depart for an evening's hunting right from this tree line. Punching a hole through the hedgerow at the top of Pembers Farm Avenue would fundamentally spoil the view, let alone the noise and debris from farm vehicles at potentially any time of day. The applicant proposal that they clean mud and debris from the road until it is adopted is completely unacceptable to my mind. Hampshire County Council themselves acknowledged they would not be able to provide the required amount of road cleaning. Also, any road cleaning would presumably wash the mud and debris into the sustainable drainage system, which in turn could block or silt up the balancing pond at likely cost to the residents. In summary, I'm very pleased to see the planning officer's recommendations. I urge the committee to back both the residents' objections and the planning officer's recommendations in this matter. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. My third speaker is Paul Selby.
Good evening, committee, and once again, thank you, like Richard, thank you for inviting us here and letting me speak this evening. As my wife alluded to, I am registered blind, severely sight impaired. So from a personal point of view, when we selected the Pembers Hill Park Estate development to move to from some distance, one of the major reasons was its beauty and its quiet and its peacefulness, quiet roads, something that for me as a blind person when I'm out walking is very important. Low traffic level, low noise, most important. So just wanted to get that out there from the beginning. But I want to discuss a question I put to you in advance last week, which is around the infrequent use quoted by the submission from the agent, as opposed to the response I got from Dawn, forwarded from you, Dawn, from Highways, which was, this is low-level traffic. The submission states 2 to 4 movements a day between May and August. I'm sorry if that's not completely accurate, that is from memory. highways are comparing that to the existing traffic on the development. We're not comparing apples with apples, we're comparing agricultural vehicles, large machinery, with domestic vehicles, TNT, couriers, and the odd occasional removal lorry. So I really feel that the highways response is inaccurate and should not stand, and I oppose that. And I also oppose the 2 to 4 uses per day. It's, you know, that could exceed presumably. And as you said earlier in your summary, they have no working hours. That could be the middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning. Another disturbance for the committee. I'm also wondering what the use is of the field. Last year we witnessed the farmer, Mr. Cooper, I assume, collecting grass, cutting it, making hay. So I wonder again what the use are and how that would affect the agricultural vehicles coming through. Finally, as I see the amber light come on, I asked myself, why are we here? This application was put through with exactly the same material proposals, the same site, the same design. Last year, that was asked to be rejected. I wonder why we're here again with a proposal from Mrs. Cooper this time for exactly the same item. I failed to see.
You have got 30 seconds left.
Okay, and finally, why are we talking about establishing this new entrance when the existing gate on Mortimer's Lane, which was planning approved in 2019, appears to provide ample access for the applicant? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. I have one final speaker in the objectors list, and that is Samuel Johnson. Could I ask you to come forward, please? You have 3 minutes, okay?
Thank you very much indeed, committee, and thank you for the invitation to speak this evening. Under English land law, planning decisions in our country are based on 2 inputs. Firstly, the input on technical grounds, and this evening it's quite clear with the fantastic work of Dawn and team that this application should be rejected on technical grounds for reasons of the safety of the children in the local community, but also in respect of visual and aesthetic perspectives in terms of loss of hedgerow. But what I'm going to speak about this evening is the other input in English planning law, which is the democratic input. From the Town and Country Planning Act 1947 all the way through to the Levelling Up Act of last year, there has been a principle underlying English planning legislation that there should be community participation and a community voice in planning. Indeed, to quote from the legislation last year, there was a statement that said, planning decisions should put local people at the heart of development. In my view, public participation in planning is critical for 2 main reasons. First of all, it facilitates perspectives that perhaps are not immediately obvious to those who are making the planning decisions, such as, for example, the people, some of the speakers this evening who've raised concerns about their children playing in the road on crisp summer's days that perhaps are not immediately obvious, and it's critical that public participation is respected for that reason. It also addresses some of the imbalances in our society, such as, for example, allowing the strong voice of a community to go up against perhaps a deep-pocketed developer, and the voice of one having the strength to influence a planning decision. And in my view, given the importance that I've just gone over of public participation, this proposal to reject this planning application is a classic example of community engagement in respect of a planning decision. On an October afternoon, I was met with around 50 residents who came out expressing genuine concern at the prospects of this gate being put in the hedgerow. I've knocked on doors across the Pembers Hill estate, and the same message on every door you knock on is the same, that they're worried that it's going to destroy the atmosphere of the place that they call home. There's also been some fantastic submissions this evening from Ian, Richard, and then the team behind this as well. And it's quite clear, committee, that the community around the Pembers Hill estate are very clearly in objection to this. And I would therefore ask you very kindly to listen to the democratic voice of Eastleigh and to reject this application. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. I now turn to speakers in support. I have one person registered. As the democratic process requires, they have the same amount of time that was afforded to objectors. So, Mr. Adrian Barker, you have 12 minutes. Do not feel obliged to use all 12 minutes. It's absolutely fine if you would, if you don't want to take up the full time, but that's what you're allotted. Thank you.
Thank you. Don't worry, I won't speak for 12 minutes. Good evening, Chair and members, and thank you for the opportunity to address you this evening. I'm Adrian Barker of Lucid Planning, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Mrs. Cooper. This application follows a previous submission which was withdrawn to facilitate production of additional supporting details to address points raised through consultation, including provision of an agricultural need case and technical transport note. Given the extensive work carried out and detailed agricultural justification produced, it is disappointing to note that the planning officer gives little consideration to the primary and undeniable need behind the proposal. Changes in circumstances, including the applicant's divorce from her husband and completion of the neighbouring residential development, has resulted in the need to provide an appropriate independent access. The new field gate will replace an existing access to the east, which will be removed and replaced with hedging, meaning that there will be no increase in access points. Relative to biodiversity, the Council's own ecologist raises no objection. It is also noted that there is no objection from the Council's tree officer. The officer recommendation suggests that the siting of the access would be harmful to visual and landscape amenity by virtue of the loss of hedgerow. It is clear from the proposals that there will in fact be no loss of hedgerow following compensatory provision to close the existing access. It is also respectfully suggested that on the edge of a settlement in a semi-rural area, gates are common features, along with agricultural uses which help create rural character. In fact, this proposal would not harm landscape or visual amenity. It is also noted that the officer is suggesting refusal on highway grounds. Yet it can be seen that HCC highways raise no objection relative to safety, as there is excellent forward visibility and vehicle movements will be low, to use their wording. These would amount to 1 visit per week for maintenance over the course of the year. For 1 week of the year, between May and August, there would be 10 visits in the week, and then for a 6-week period between October and January, there would be daily checks for animal welfare while sheep are grazing. Most movements will be in a Land Rover, with only 10% being carried out by tractor and trailer. These will be slow-moving vehicles and pose no more of a safety threat than other vehicles on the estate. HCC's only concerns relate to ensuring that any debris on the road is cleaned up. In this regard, the applicant invited a condition requiring agreement and compliance with a farm management plan, committing to how mud on the road will be managed going forward. This would have involved a fortnightly road sweeping programme to the point of adoption, and, as a minimum, would necessitate the farmer using shovels and brooms to clear any debris from the road. There is no technical, highway, ecological or tree objections, whilst possible landscape harm would appear, in our view, to be overstated. The applicant believes that there is a clear need for the works, and without them, her agricultural land and its beneficial use will be sterilised through lack of access. The alternative is to look to commence reuse of the existing access point, which, as the officer has noted in her report, may be less desirable. It is considered that on balance the proposal should be approved, and accordingly we would invite members to revisit the recommendation put forward by the case officer. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, first of all, I would like to ask if you have any questions you would like to put to our officers. This is not debate, this is just for questions. So if anybody does have any questions for Dawn, would you please indicate? Councillor Tidridge.
Thank you. Quick question. The roads on the Pembers Hill housing estate, are they adopted? And if not, are there plans for them to be adopted?
So they're not yet adopted. They are planned to be adopted, and I'm told that would be in about 18 months' time.
Do we have any other questions? Councillor Caws.
Yeah, just a quick question as well. The existing access, I couldn't really understand from the map, can tractors and trailers access through that, the existing access?
So they can't at the moment because the approved landscaping for the estate is in front of it, so there's a hedge, a newly planted hedge, I suppose, as we can see the fence in that photo. So at this current time, they can't use it, well, certainly not for vehicles.
Councillor Caws, do you want to come back?
So how about the other access point? What can go through that on the field?
So there's one existing access, the one I've just shown you. The application is for a proposed new access, so it's not there at present.
But on the other map, there's a couple of green dots kind of towards the back of the field. Are they not access points as well?
So yes, they are access points to the agricultural holding joining their third party. So there are some on third party land.
But not accessible.
So these ones are third party land. This is technically third party if it's owned by the applicant's ex-husband.
Okay, so these are not accessible by vehicle.
There are other access points, but they're not directly to the field in question.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Tidridge and then Councillor Broomfield.
Thank you. Just to confirm, when Pembers Hill estate was built, there was obviously a landscape plan. Can I just confirm whether or not that original landscape plan included provision for this agricultural access point or not?
No, it didn't.
Thank you.
Councillor Broomfield.
Thank you. Just a very quick question of clarification. In paragraph 9, which summarises the objections received from residents, the penultimate bullet point says may provide access for future residential development. I'm assuming that is not something on which we can base a decision. What might happen in the future is, strictly speaking, not part of the discussion. Am I right in thinking that?
So I'm just checking the report. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Councillor Couldrey.
Thank you. The access point from Mortimer's Lane isn't usable at the moment, but frankly, as far as I can see, it just needs a couple of swings of heavy mallet to hit a few fence posts out. Is there any technical reason why the applicant can't amend that so as to get access to that?
Sorry, can I just clarify? You do mean Mortimer's Lane?
The Mortimer's Lane access, yes.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't aware that it wasn't in use. So sorry, I can't. I don't know whether it can simply be reopened or not. It's not part of the application side.
No, it's not part of the application, but it is a material that the client can get through, that the farmer can get access at that point. Is it not?
Well, we've approved access at that point. It's up to the farmer whether they actually implement it. Yes, that's right.
There's no legal impediment to them doing so.
Sorry, I can't answer any other legal questions, but in terms of planning, we have granted planning permission for that alternative access. Yeah.
there any more questions? Okay, so now to open this up to debate, I will need a proposer, which is, thank you, Councillor Broomfield, and a seconder, Councillor Tidridge. Is there any debate? Councillor Tidridge.
Thank you. I listened with great interest to the residents of the housing estate in terms of concerns about safety. I'm concerned that the road is unadopted. It's good that it should be handed over to HCC, but I'm concluding from the answers to our questions that this the road layout for these houses was done from a perspective of access to the houses for residential purposes, not designed to be a through road. There are issues with having a housing estate, unadopted roads, being used as a through road for traffic. There's an example closer to an area I know a lot better in Bishopstoke, where that's very much the case. I'm concerned that having unrestricted agricultural access, even restricted agricultural access, will result in debris on the road. And yes, it's good to know that the applicant is minded to stay on top of this, but that presumably can't be enforced in terms of planning consent. And that's something which would be of great concern to me. More so, though, to be honest, is the safety factor. People choosing to live in effectively a cul-de-sac kind of estate, one of the huge benefits is that your kids can play out. And certainly from a councillor perspective, I would like to feel that residents in that area are encouraged to cycle, to walk, to run, be active, and be able to enjoy living in that part of Fair Oak. I would have thought that would be a major positive. The fear that safety may be compromised through agricultural vehicles trundling up and down through roads which had not been designed to take heavy vehicles would be a great concern to me. I think if I was a parent living in one of the houses in that particular area, it seems that it's not designed for that. It's concerning that when the changes that were made to the land ownership resulted in a parcel of land effectively being stuck without access. Yeah, that's a real shame, but I don't think that that's a matter which should have a detrimental effect on the residents of the Pembers Hill housing development. One person's parcelling of land shouldn't be resulting in a significant reduction in safety and quality of life for those residents. And finally, I am really concerned about the hedgerow. Saying that there'd be no net change in the amount of hedgerow fails to recognise how hedgerows operate. They take time to establish. They take time to establish a level of biodiversity, and I think letting the hedge develop into its own habitat is something which doesn't happen instantly. So therefore, I don't think you can take the approach of, well, we just put some new stuff in elsewhere. Habitats don't quite work like that. So yeah, that is of great concern to me. The fact the tree officer has not objected, it's the hedge that actually has greater concern to me from a wildlife habitat perspective. I think that sums up my concerns about this application. I feel that it would compromise safety and quality of life for the residents of the estate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tidridge. Councillor Broomfield.
Thank you. I think one thing we have to do is to appraise residents on bringing this to our attention. We were contacted by residents who saw the signs go up, and it's been quite a long haul to get here. Certainly very grateful for all the work Dawn's put in on putting this paper together and coming up with the recommendations she has. I think it's Pembers Farm Avenue, Pembers Farm Estate, is actually, I think, quite rare in this area, and it's actually a really nice estate. There are some not so nice ones, I have to say, that have been built over the past few years. And I think Pembers Farm in particular has the basis of excuse me, a really, really nice community. I think having unrestricted agricultural access going to the core road on that estate is just absolutely wrong. I fully support everything Jen has said about the ecology and local wildlife and so on, but just thinking of the lovely views that people have across those fields, taking out the hedge, potential tree line, and having farm traffic moving up and down the residential area is just absolutely wrong. So I think I fully support the recommendation. I'm really glad that's where we've got to. And as I say, I think the residents of Pembers Farm really need to pat themselves on the back for actually having fought the good fight and fought it very, very well. So thank you.
Would any other member like to? Councillor Couldrey.
Thank you. I'll be short. I entirely agree with the recommendation of the officer to reject this. I think it's totally conceived. I agree with everything my colleagues, councillors, said, and I will not be voting for it.
Thank you very much. So just to add my thoughts, yes, I'm hugely concerned about the health and well-being of our young people and everybody's enjoyment of their areas in which they live in. I can't really add much more than everybody else has already said. And again, I must reiterate that we must thank every resident that contacted us in advance to express their views. Also, I suppose, do I have to declare an interest as a county councillor? Because we have touched on Hampshire County Council, but one of the documents which is currently going through at the moment, which is the local transport plan for, very much highlights the hierarchy of road user need, which says that our most vulnerable road users must come first. And so with that always freshly in my mind, I think that on the grounds of safety, the officers have directed us well. So I too shall not be supporting this application. So if there's no other member wishing to speak in debate, can I have a show of hands? All those in favour of supporting the recommendation as set out in the paper, please show.
Are we voting for the application or against it?
We're voting on the recommendation, which is to refuse. It is what it is. We have to vote for the recommendation, which is to refuse. If you vote against, you'll be voting to approve. So, just so that there is no misunderstanding, the recommendation has been put back up on the screen, so we are voting that subject to the considerations of any new issues raised by neighbours by the 1st of February 2024 to delegate back to the Service Director for Planning and Environment in conjunction with the Chair and the Vice Chair to refuse prior approval. All in favour, please indicate. That's unanimous. Thank you, members. Now, I'm not sure everybody wants to stay for all the other items. You are more than welcome, but if you would like to leave now, I shall call for a 2-minute break to let people leave if they so wish. Thank you. Okay then, members, we will now move on to item 10, which is Brightstone Botley Road, Horton Heath, F2395549, and I will ask Gary, isn't it, who's going to be talking on this, Gary, to present the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as the Chair said, application of Brightstone, Botley Road and Horton Heath for the proposed construction of 5 dwellings together with ancillary landscaping, parking and associated works following demolition of the existing bungalow on site and other works. So this is the application site. Brightstone, we have Botley Road here, so we're on the sort of southern edge of Horton Heath. That's the Brigadier Gerard pub. I'm sure everybody knows where that is, almost opposite. And this is Brightstone, which is a modest bungalow, but on a very large, sort of elongated plot. And to the north, there's a number of properties. Number 14, Hideaway and Southview, which, as you can see on here, have relatively modest, well, not gardens as such, but there's they're close to the boundary, their southern boundaries and the site's northern boundary. So in terms of just the aerial photo, to give a bit of an idea in terms of the character of the locality here, that's our 2 neighbouring properties off Cherry Drove and their garages with first floor accommodation above, and this is the existing property, Brightstone, and the pub there. So a few photographs. These are sort of from the frontage, so from Botley Road. You can see there the left-hand photo, that's looking through the existing access. Brightstone is a 1970s bungalow, and to its north, or to the left-hand or right-hand side here, is a property called Nerome, which is a 1920s, 30s, 2-storey semi-detached. And as you can see here, it's set behind a decent boundary planting, so the property, the existing bungalow, isn't really seen in the street scene. And then this is the garage to the neighbouring property to the south, which I can't remember the view of now, Meadow View I think it is. So these are views from behind. So the central one there is the back of Brightstone itself. To the left is the back looking towards their own, those pair of semis. And to the right, the neighbouring property here is a 2-storey, quite sizable 2-storey, relatively modern red brick property. These are views looking down the garden, so looking westward, and each one gradually gets a bit further down the garden. And you can see there are a few fruit trees and ornamental trees, but it's predominantly later lawn. There are a few outbuildings, sheds, summer house, greenhouse, and so on. And then the photo on the right-hand side here, these are 3 large oak trees which sit along the western boundary, and they are subject to tree preservation orders. And these 2 photos here are of the 2 main properties to the rear. I don't have a photo of number 14. I'm not sure why I didn't have one there. I obviously missed it on my site visit. But these are Hideaway and Southview. And as you can see, they're quite close to the boundary, the northern boundary there, and they have existing views across Brightstone's garden to the land beyond south. And this just gives an idea, whilst it's sort of almost on the edge of Horton Heath, if you like. The site itself is within the urban edge, as is the field to its immediate south. So everything in white here is within the urban edge. So that sets out the principle, basic principle of redevelopment is acceptable in principle, subject to any other detailed matters to be considered. And the areas here in sort of orange, they're the allocated land for the One Horton Heath development. So in terms of the proposal itself, the existing bungalow that sits here would be taken down. There are 5 properties, plots 1 and 2 at the front, which are modest 3-bedroom, 2-storey semi-detached properties, one slight setback from the other. Parking for plot 1 at the front, parking for plot 2 at the rear. That would be within a carport with a loft space, and part of the reason for the carport with a loft space is the existing bungalow has a back roost in it, and that would act as essentially a replacement back roost, and there's a condition requiring the final details of that to be agreed prior to it happening. Within the middle is plot 3, again another 3-bedroom property, but it's a sort of chalet style, i.e. first floor accommodation predominantly within the roof, and its parking and garden area. And then to the rear is plots 4, which is a 2-storey 4-bedroom property, and plots 5, which again is a 2-storey 5-bedroom property. And these will all be accessed via the shared driveway which runs along the northern edge of the site. The layout has been arranged to try and limit as best possible impact on neighbouring properties, and as you can see, the properties or the proposed plots are sort of sat in the gaps, if you like, between existing properties. So there are still views beyond through over the gardens, and again beyond through there. It works less successfully potentially here for Southview, but there is still a reasonable view. Distance in terms of the main windows here, at the closest point there's a set of French doors there at first floor level to the closest point of this side garage is 9.5 metres. And then from this window here to the corner again is just around 10 metres. So whilst not the best of relationships, on balance it's not considered quite bad enough to consider refusal. So there will certainly be an impact on the view, but not in planning terms upon the outlook, which, as I've sort of set out within the report, there is a difference in planning terms upon those two things, two elements. Looking then at each plot individually, just so for completeness really, so plots 1 and 2, modest pair of semi-detached 2-storey semis. Plot 3, say predominantly a chalet bungalow. All its main windows are only at first floor level are to the east, west and south. There are some windows at high level here on the northern elevation, but they're set well above head height, so as to ensure no loss of privacy for the adjoining or neighbouring property number 14, which is the closest, and vice versa. Plot 4 is what it is, sort of fairly traditional designed, predominantly 2-storey dwelling with a attached double garage, and the same for plot 5, a similar idea, slightly larger again as a 5-bedroom property. And then just to give an indication of sort of view from the south, so this would be from the adjoining field. At the top view there is sort of as existing, and then the view in the middle is as would be proposed. And as you can see, it sort of is akin to that edge of existing built-up area that's found all around the edges of Horton Heath, certainly on its western side, and so should sit fairly comfortably in that regard. And the bottom there is an indication in terms of the street scene. So as you saw from the previous photos, you don't really see the existing property because it's low level, set back from the road and the boundary planting, and whilst what's proposed to the front are 2-storey, they're quite modest in comparison to the 2 neighbouring properties and should sit fairly comfortably within that fairly mixed character. If anything, the existing bungalow is slightly out of keeping with that stretch of Botley Road there, which are predominantly 2-storey properties. So in terms of updates, since the report was published, still no response from Natural England. However, that doesn't prevent the authority from determining the application. Their statutory consultation period has passed a number of weeks ago. I believe they are struggling to get responses back to authorities because of the workload and other issues, but it doesn't mean that we can't determine the application one way or other. Ultimately, the council, as a local planning authority, is the responsible authority for determining the application, and we can still make a decision even without a response from Natural England. So moving quickly on to the assessment, as I mentioned previously, we're within the urban edge, so in basic principle terms, redevelopment of the site is acceptable. In terms of layout, it's an awkward site, awkward shape, not the best of relationships with the immediate existing neighbours, but on the whole it makes a good use of the site whilst doing its best to limit impact upon those existing properties, and whilst at the same time sort of reflecting that pattern of development in the locality. In terms of form, scale and appearance, it's quite traditional in terms of pitched roof, bricks, tile hanging, very characteristic of certainly more recent development in and around Horton Heath. In terms of access and parking, it meets all the necessary standards. There were some initial queries from Hampshire Highways with regards to the access, but that's now been resolved. Will now be 2 separate access, and the road will be given its own access. It will no longer have to share one, and then there will be access to the proposed development will move slightly further south, so that will prevent any confusion there. In terms of ecological mitigation and enhancement, those can be secured through landscaping, so we have a replacement bat roost and so on as well. In terms of physical impact on protected trees, there won't be any. You'll note there was a concern from the council's tree consultant with regards to potential future pressure from occupiers of plot 5 with regards to those trees. But on balance, again, the garden is a sufficient size and has an open enough area to the south that shouldn't be detrimental upon the trees, and equally it will be buyer beware. Those trees will be there. Anybody will can't fail to miss them, so it'll be something that any future owners will be well aware of. In terms of landscaping and tree planting, whilst the majority of the existing fruit trees would be removed, there would be replacement trees within the landscaping scheme at an appropriate ratio of 1:1, which is as required by the Trees Development SPD, and the majority of those would be on communal land, not within private gardens, so that gives a degree of control in that respect. Drainage and servicing are all workable, and again there's conditions for the final details in terms of drainage, particularly for the access road, to make sure there's no runoff onto neighbouring properties. In terms of amenity for future occupiers, all plots exceed the minimum standards in terms of internal floor area and garden space, and they'll all have a good level of natural light, amenity and privacy. And equally for the neighbours, whilst there is, let's say, reservation with regards to plot 5 and Southview, on balance, it's not considered poor enough or bad enough to warrant a refusal of the application. So the recommendation is then subject to any outstanding matters from National England, should we get them, and securing mitigation towards New Forest and Solent special policy areas, which the applicant has agreed to provide, should the application be approved, is to delegate the decision back to the Service Director for Planning and Environment. That should be in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair, apologies, missed that on there, to permit the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I have a couple of people wishing to speak in objection. Could I ask Mr. Andrew Kimball to come forward? You will have 3 minutes, and I will let you know when there's 30 seconds left. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to speak before the committee this evening. My name is Andrew Kimball. I am the owner of Southview, the residential property immediately to the north of the proposed development of plot 5, which is the 5-bedroom house, and also plot 4 is directly in front of my garage, and that's the 4-bedroom house. I object to the application, and I would refer members to the letters from my solicitors of the 31st of August and the 8th of November for the full reasons for my objections. That also includes some further photographs which expand on the information Gary has provided. In the limited time given to me tonight, I wanted to focus on the material impact that plot 5 would have on my family's amenity, privacy and quiet enjoyment of our property. Southview, as the name suggests, has south-facing floor-to-ceiling windows and Juliet balconies on the 2 bedrooms on the first floor, and floor-to-ceiling bifold doors and windows on the length of the south-facing ground floor. The proposed plot 5 is directly south of my property and will have a significant impact on us. In terms of privacy, we will need to keep our curtains and blinds closed to have any privacy within our bedrooms. I would also refer you to the Planning Officer's own recommendations, and in particular paragraphs 60 and 61, which refer to the impact on Southview. I quote, "The relationship between plot 5 and Southview will result in significant negative impact on southerly views. In relation to the impact on outlook and accepted material consideration," he says, "there will be a not insignificant impact. It is borderline as to whether it would be to such an extent as to be considered unacceptable and detrimental. In my view, the impacts on amenity and privacy are very significant. It is difficult to see how they could be more damaging to my family's privacy and enjoyment of our property. Other than a minor change to move the location of the garage for plot 5, actually closer to our boundary edge, the developers have not taken any of our responses into account in revising their plans. I would also refer you to the comments concerning the impact of plot 5 on the 3 protected oak trees, which is referred to in the recommendation.
You've got 30 seconds.
Thank you. In summary, I request that plot 5 is reconsidered and the application rejected or revised. If the application is accepted, I would also request that in relation to the proposed bathroom window for plot 4, the condition is imposed that the glass is obscured, as the window currently will allow views of our bedrooms. In relation to the proposed road, I would also request that the condition is imposed the surface is noise minimising. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I now ask Andrea Sankey to speak? Thank you. You've got 3 minutes, okay?
Thank you. Good evening. Hello, my name is Andrea and I live with my family at Nero, next door to Bishopstoke. We've moved there, it's just over a year ago. I wish to object strongly to the development of these houses. My concern is the roadway running alongside the entire length of my home and garden. The fumes and noise will have a major impact on how we'll be able to use our outside space. Also, the traffic generation from the development itself. I don't think that replacing a 3-bedroom bungalow with 5 2-storey properties is reasonable. With this brings an untold amount of cars, day and night, running alongside my home. This will have a huge impact on my day-to-day living, as at present I share a drive with 1 household. I believe this brings no value to the local community, environment or affordable housing, other than personal financial gain at the expense of surrounding neighbours and the quality of our living. I also believe that this will devalue my home. It has been implied that I should be grateful to gain a singular driveway of which I already have shared ownership of. I just strongly feel that the project is too vast for the area it's being developed on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have 1 person registered to speak in support. Jacob, good enough. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to address you this evening. Firstly, we would like to thank officers for their time throughout the application, and we of course support their independent and balanced recommendation to approve the proposal. I'd like to use my time this evening to focus on the key areas of concerns that have been raised by the neighbours and to explain how the proposals have evolved through positive dialogue with officers to address these concerns. Firstly, concerns have been raised about the effect on outlook, amenity and views. Working with officers, the applicant has amended the proposals during the application in response to these comments, including changes to plot 1. Plot 5, sorry. The orientation and placement of the windows has been carefully considered against these comments and the requirements of the Council's adopted Quality Places SPD. There are no windows in plot 5 that will directly look towards the property known as Southview. The proposal achieves acceptable relationships with neighbouring properties in line with those of the adopted standards and will not result in a loss of privacy or amenity. The proposal will also include safeguards through robust planning conditions that will ensure that these relationships are maintained in the future. And to be clear, these conditions will prevent new owners and of the homes extending or adapting the houses without the approval of the council. And that is deliberately to protect the amenity of neighbours. Secondly, a concern has been expressed about the density of the proposal, and this would represent overdevelopment of the site. The council have adopted a local plan which strives to achieve 40 dwellings per hectare within the designated urban area. That would equate to 12 houses being appropriate on this site. However, in design proposals, the applicant has carefully considered the pattern and grain of development locally, alongside boundary trees and the relationship with neighbouring properties. Taking these considerations together, the proposal is for 5 dwellings, which would equate to 17 dwellings per hectare. This compares well with the recently approved development, known as Southview to the north, which achieved 14 dwellings per hectare on its plot. It is considered the proposal complements the established character of the area, whilst also balancing the need to make efficient use of land within the urban boundary. Lastly, there have also been some concerns expressed about the loss of some small garden fruit trees. The proposal mitigates this through new landscaping that will be secured by condition. The more substantial boundary trees that are subject to preservation orders are retained, and the design of the houses have been amended through the application to ensure that that relationship is protected, including the reorientation of principal reception rooms to lessen future pressure to prune and cut back. Taking all these considerations together, officers have independently assessed the proposals and are satisfied that it achieves an acceptable density, appropriate relationships with neighbouring properties, and would not lead to an unacceptable pressure to prune or cut back protected trees. The proposal will deliver much needed housing on a sustainable site within the defined settlement boundary and raises no conflicts with the adopted policy or guidance. We hope you support your officer's recommendation and grant planning permission this evening. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Have councillors got any questions for Gary on his presentation? Councillor Caws and then Councillor Couldrey. Councillor Caws.
Yes, my question is about the plot 5 and in relation to the trees. Judging by the plan, the property is on the absolute line of the tree boundary, and as we all know, trees are living things and they grow, so including the roots. So we just saw last week that there is an issue with just down the road in Meadowsweet Way, a tree that roots are causing subsidence to one of the houses, and then they're coming back to the council. So what makes you think that by putting a property on the tree boundaries where the tree roots are known that they will grow, what makes this a good idea?
We can only go on what our agricultural consultant said. On the drawing here, it doesn't show up so well, but the grey outline is actually a patio or pathway around the outside. The house itself is set back a little bit further from the root protection areas, which are shown this sort of red-orange line there. So the building itself is outside of the root protection areas, and yes, trees will grow, so there's no technical objection from our arboriculturalist, and I have to take what he says as being the case. In terms of foundations and so on, yes, it may well be that suitable foundations will need to be put in place to counteract any potential future subsidence and so on, but that's not a reason to say knock it back. There won't be any adverse harm on those trees through the construction of the building. The concern that was raised was the potential future pressure from future occupiers who may want works undertaken to those trees, but equally any works require consent from the local authority, and they can only have works agreed that are sound in arboricultural terms. So simply because it drops acorns and drops leaves is not sufficient ground to have works done. It has to be sound arboricultural grounds.
Councillor Couldrey, you had a question.
Yes, I must confess I was a little confused by the density argument. So could you just explain what density that plan is compared to the density requirements of the...
Yes, policy, I think it's DM23 from memory, requires any sites within the urban edge, which this would be or is, to achieve 40 dwellings a hectare. 40 dwellings a hectare. It does allow for exceptions where circumstances of the site make it appropriate. In this instance, the scheme equates to 17 dwellings per hectare. So we're well under that minimum requirement, but equally, realistically, you couldn't meet the 40 dwellings a hectare. Yeah, it's sort of, this is a site that needs to have a bespoke scheme designed around it because of its shape and the relationships with the neighbours. So density is not necessarily an issue as such, it's more what is appropriate in terms of the pattern of development within the locality.
Councillor Broomfield.
Thank you. Two questions actually. The first one, thinking about the houses in the back garden, so we're talking 1 3, 1 4 and 1 5 bedroom. How many car parking spaces or how many cars would one expect to be using those number of bedrooms, if you like? And the second question, just for confirmation, the bin collection will be by Botley Road, so the bin lorry won't be coming in, driving up to number 5, backing out, so they'll trundle their wheelie bins down the rear. Okay. So just come back to how many cars we would expect to be using those 3 properties.
To accord with the residential parking standards SPD, a 3-bedroom property requires 2 off-road spaces. And so plot 1 has its 2 spaces there, plot 2 has its 2 spaces there, plot 3, again another 3-bedroom property, has its 2 spaces there, plus room to manoeuvre and turn around. Plot 4 and 5, they're 4 and 5-bedroom properties, and anything 4-bedroom and above is required to have a minimum of 3 off-road spaces. These have 4. There is 2 within the garage for each one, there's double garages, and 2 on the driveway immediately in front. So according with our current SPD standards, those actually exceed the 3 minimum spaces. Plus there is other space around, albeit this is intended really as a turning head, there is sort of additional occasional parking available there, and not so much along the access road itself, it's not quite wide enough, but there is in and around the properties. And so in terms of parking, there should be ample to meet the requirements as our guidance suggests for the proposed properties themselves, plus the occasional visitor parking.
Just a very question, if I can ask, this is not, I'm sure, going to be built to a level which would be adopted by highways.
Any more questions from members? Because I have a couple otherwise. Do you want to come back in now, Councillor Tidridge? Okay, so I just want clarification. Does this mean that all the trees on site currently have tree protection orders? Because you've just stated that they would have to come back for decision. So I just wanted to make sure that that's accurate. And my second question is about the bats and about the impact this will have on the bat foraging corridor and their location, because telling a bat to move is not an easy thing to do. So I just want some reassurance about how the bats are going to be managed.
In terms of the protected trees, 3 oaks at the back along the western edge of the site, they are the ones that are subject to the preservation orders. No other trees on site are subject to any preservation orders. They're ornamental trees and fruit trees which wouldn't usually be given preservation status. It's the 3 oaks at the rear, so no other trees on site are. In terms of the bats, yeah, they're within the loft of the existing bungalow. Our ecologist has reviewed that. There is appropriate replacement roost would be provided. Yes, we can't force them to move into it, but we can try and encourage them to. But obviously no works can happen to demolition of the existing bungalow or anything without appropriate licences and so on from Natural England being secured. So, which is a separate matter, but is something that our ecologist is happy that can be obtained. So in terms of the sort of corridors, flight corridors, we do have the existing hedge through here and the field with trees and so on. So I imagine that's quite a good corridor that they use, which is possibly the reason why they're roosting here. That, certainly on the southern side, would be retained. It would be interesting interrupted a little bit on the northern side, but it's not detrimental to their habitat in that regard. This hedge would be retained, and there would be additional landscaping and so on, which can be a bit more diverse than is there at present. So there's no objections been raised by our ecologists with regards to that.
Sorry, do you know what type of bats they are? Because of course they all have different requirements and different ways of finding and foraging for food, and obviously you may be introducing additional predators into the area. So I just want to be reassured about how that's being managed, because it is illegal to disturb and disrupt a bat roost.
That's correct. Yeah, I can't recall which species they are off the top of my head. Thank you, Kitty. Yeah, but I do know that they like an open loft rather than little nooks and crannies and crevices. They like an open loft as their roost, hence why they've moved into the loft space here. And the idea is that would be replicated with an open loft above the carport to give them a similar sort of environment that they can move into there. Or at least it replaces the existing roost and gives them the opportunity to move into there.
So does that also mean that they will not be allowed to have external lights on those properties?
Ultimately, we can't control what people decide to put on the outside of their house. We couldn't condition you can't have lighting. We can look at a lighting strategy, but it's more for the communal areas in terms of what lighting goes on. But ultimately, if somebody wants to put up a whack and great searchlight on the back of their house or security light, we can't really prevent that from happening.
Councillor Tidridge.
I'm okay, thank you.
Any other specific questions? This isn't about the debate and our thoughts on this so far, so no more questions from members. Okay, I require a proposer and a seconder to lead us into debate.
I'll propose it on the basis we need to get the debate started.
Yes, we do indeed. Thank you, Councillor Broomfield. Can I have a seconder, Councillor Caws? Thank you very much. Would anybody like to speak in debate? Councillor Broomfield.
I'll start the ball rolling. I've visited the site a couple of times and had a look at the lie of the land, and I can quite understand why the neighbours are so concerned about this. I mean, Andrea in Nero is going to have traffic coming along by the side of her house, by the side of her property that she's never had before. So you've got 5-bedroom house, 4-bedroom house, 3-bedroom house. All the traffic will come up and down that way, and that will no doubt include the Amazon drivers and all the rest of it. So she's going to be quite severely impacted by that. And certainly Andy Kimball in Southview is going to lose an awful lot of his amenity. You know, yes, we can't protect everybody's views, but realistically, sticking a 5-bedroom house that close to his living, the living part of his house, his kitchen, his sitting room and so on, and his bedrooms, does seem to me to be rather more than we could reasonably expect someone to put up with. I really don't like this application. I take Parish Council's point, which is there's too much of it. It's too big a development in a relatively small space. And I take the developer's comment that it's part of it's the pattern of development locally. You know, Hedge End has suffered from this sort of planning blight for quite some time, and I really think this is just too much on too small a space. So I would struggle to support this application. I really think we could do better out of it. So yeah, my feeling is not to support the recommendation. I really think there's too much crammed in too small a space, and it's too much of an impact on local residents. That's it, really. I can't say much more.
Thank you, Councillor Broomfield. Would any other member like to speak on Councillor Tidridge?
Thank you. I think I'm finding myself in agreement with Ferret Parish Council. I don't think, I really feel that this is a demonstration of overdevelopment. I take the points about housing density, but then so much of the plot is having to be given over to the access road. It feels that it's trying to squeeze an awful lot into a comparatively small space, especially plot 5. I think if this, from my perspective, if plot 5 wasn't in this plan, I think I probably would be taking a slightly different view. Although obviously, not having development on plot 5 could perhaps enable the rest of it to be a little bit more spread out. I don't know. But to me, the plot looks like it's subjected to a lot of hard surfacing, although I'm sure that will be put in a permeable way. It's replacing what was a garden stroke orchard with a lot of hard surfaces. I'm concerned about the oak trees. I think having development that close to the oak trees will be of concern. I'm concerned that this committee will almost inevitably receive an application from the resident of the new property when they move in to want to do something about the trees. We've seen that many times before. And I think that that level of development due to close to 3 valuable tree just doesn't sit right with me. So there's a lot of hard surfacing. Picking up on Councillor Parker-Jones' comments about the bats, it's not just a question of providing a home for the bats. There's plenty of things that disturb bats, cats, for example, lights. And yeah, you could argue that if lights prove to be a nuisance, then neighbours could always pursue environmental health for light nuisance. But surely, as a principle of good planning, we'd want to make sure that hard surfaces, lights, whatever can be specified to mitigate the impact of this massive loss of green space is done. But I think I'd feel very differently about this if it wasn't quite so many houses. I think for me, that's probably the block. I don't necessarily have a problem with back garden developments. I think there are worse things, but in this case, it feels to me that it's a lot of housing jammed into a small space. In terms of housing need, the loss of a 5-bedroom, comparatively expensive house, to me, that doesn't feel like that would be a significant negative impact on the borough's housing plan, but that's just my view. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tidridge. Sorry, Councillor Couldrey, you indicating, Councillor Couldrey.
Thank you. I should first start by saying that, in principle, I think we have to support building of infill sites. If we don't, we're going to be using more and more pristine land and taking it out of other enjoyment of beauty. So I started by looking at this with a positive attitude. I thought the report was very good. I also thought that many of the features of the design that were meant to deal with the problems of the development and the siting of the houses in between the gaps, etc., I thought it was all pretty good stuff. But I do feel that we have gone too far on plot 5. Not the only problem. I entirely acknowledge the traffic problem. I'm afraid it is a problem, and there is no answer to it if you're going to develop infill sites like this. So if we're going to approve it, that's what we're doing. We're approving that. But then, plot 5, I think, is just too much. I'm trying to get back to the report, which was the report said that it was the redesign was not so successful in relation to plot 5 in Southview, which I think that's all there. It then goes on to say in paragraph 61, it is borderline as to whether it would be to such an extent as to be considered unacceptable and detrimental in planning terms. Now, on balance, the reporting officer thought it was just about doable. I'm afraid that I don't. I've been to the site. It's a huge house that's going to be designed right bang next door to to Southview. It's not fair. It's not, I think, something that we should be supporting. And so I would like to see this plan take out that house, reduce it perhaps to a bungalow. I don't know. I think probably better taken out. And then I could support that proposal. But without, I don't know whether technically we say no or whether we refer it back or whatever, but that's my approach.
Thank you, Councillor Couldrey. Councillor Caws.
Yes, I'm in agreement with everyone here. I think it smacks of greed, just having this amount of houses on one single previous plot. And, you know, I mean, it's a lovely area. The houses do have a lot of space around them generally. So to cram in a lot more houses so close, particularly, you know, with plot 5, I would agree that between the trees and between the outlook of the detrimental effect to the outlook of Southview, plot 5 needs to not be there, definitely. And also, it is talking about in keeping with the character of the area. I mean, these houses are not in keeping with the character. When you look at the houses that are further up on the estate, most of the neighbouring properties, yes, they're close, but they're next door. Next door, that's why it's next door neighbour. You know, these are, the view is, this is an in front neighbour, this is a behind neighbour, this is not a next door neighbour. This is why it is having such a detrimental effect on the outlook, and this is why I feel that as it stands, I can't support this.
Thank you, Councillor Caws. Oh, could you turn your microphone off, please? Thank you very much. I'm very much in agreement with all my colleagues. I'm particularly concerned about the overdevelopment of plot 5, and I probably am more akin to with what Councillor Tidridge said, which is up until that point, some of the other development seemed like it might be acceptable, but plot 5 to me just seems overdeveloped. I'm concerned about the oak trees and its proximity. I'm concerned about its size and the outlook for Southview. And I was very concerned to read an officer saying it might very justifiably just get over the line. That's not a healthy place to be. And I really feel that this has come to us too early and that it should have gone back, and plot 5 in particular needed to be looked at again. I'm beginning to get a sense of how members feel about this, and of course we have got an entire application in front of us. Would you mind if I call a quick, brief hold for 5 seconds so I can have a quick word with the planners before we go into a vote with members' mind? Thank you. Okay, members. So, first of all, we have to go to the vote on the matter that's in front of us. And if it's not, if the recommendation is not successful, I will call a recess to talk to planners. So,
Point of order.
absolutely.
Are we allowed to recommend that it's referred back for further consideration?
First of all, we have to vote on this recommendation, and then if that recommendation fails, we have to give the reasons for that recommendation and why it failed. Now, if all members want to do is to defer it, that's slightly different. We'll be back to where we are. Yeah, we'd still be back to where we are, so we would still have to stop and get some advice, okay? So, in the first instance, we're going to vote on the recommendation as it is in front of us, as nobody has proposed an alternative recommendation, and then we will move towards having Councillor Broomfield.
Sorry, Chair. I think we have to accept a development here will happen. It's, as Nick said, we have to use these spaces. We don't have an alternative. But what we need to do is make it more acceptable to neighbours, particularly, I think, near Roe and Southview, that they're less impacted, less negatively impacted. So rather than reject this out of hand, which will end up in an appeal which brings us back to where we are, where we don't want to be, a more constructive discussion with developers to find something that we and neighbours would find more acceptable would probably be a better route. So from that point, can we propose, I'm happy to propose if we're allowed to, a referral back for further discussion to bring back something which we can, I appreciate that puts more work on everybody, but I think it's probably a more successful outcome than just, no, we don't like it.
Councillors, given that you want to move an amendment, I'm going to call a 5-minute break to enable planning officers to provide you with the appropriate words to ensure that we get a new recommendation, which we can then debate, proposed. Is that all right, members? So everybody, you've got 5 minutes. Welcome back, everybody, and is everybody back in the room? Okay, so first we are going to look at the recommendation as it is, and members will be required to vote on that. If the application was to fail, we will then request information from our planning officers to articulate the points members have made. Okay? So, all in favour of accepting the recommendation as stated at the page 39, which is subject to receipt of the outstanding consultation responses from Natural England and any actions required as a result of comment received, and securing mitigation towards recreational impact of the development upon the Solent and New Forest SPAs, delegate to the Service Director for Planning and Environment to permit, subject to the following conditions. So that was the recommendation. All in favour of that recommendation? Anybody against? That's unanimous. Okay, members. I'm just going to ask my planning officers to put some words on the screen to highlight the areas of our concern. Right, members, I have a revised recommendation. The proposed wordings are to delegate back to the Service Director for Planning and Environment in consultation with the Chair and the Vice Chair to refuse on the grounds of the impact upon residential amenity of neighbouring properties. So, for example, that will cover the matters of outlook and traffic, future pressure upon protected trees and the wider ecology, and failure to secure mitigation for impact upon solar and new forest SPAs. I will need to have a proposer and a seconder for the revised recommendation as it is laid in front of us. Cllr Broomfield and Councillor Caws seconded. Okay, members. So we're now voting on the... Would any members like to have a debate on the proposals as Councillor Tidridge?
Thank you. Is there any reason why overdevelopment isn't included in the revised recommendation, seeing as that was really the concern that we were most concerned about?
Yes, Councillor, I think overdevelopment's a difficult one to... I hate planning by numbers, if you like, so it's more than just purely density. And if I put the other hat on, if you like, if I was representing the applicant, I would argue, well, it's well under the 40 dwellings per hectare, so therefore how can it be overdevelopment? So I think, again, it's more about the
Councillor Couldrey.
I appreciate that they haven't secured the mitigation, but I believe that this is the sort of thing that is always done after the application is subject, and therefore it's really a very technical and it hasn't got any merit. That's really my...
Councillor Couldrey, I believe it's a matter that we always have to put in because of our legal requirements.
Okay.
So, okay. So we have to have that aspect included. As an aside, I think my concerns are still things like Natural England did not provide a response, and I'm hugely disappointed with them. I actually think that this goes beyond just this application, and it is not appropriate for us to be having to take decisions when our expert consultees are not coming forward and providing us with appropriate information. So I'm hugely disappointed with that. And I do think it's worth us seeking to have a note added that we were not opposed to the full development, but that there were aspects we wanted to see improved. So with this new recommendation as is, can I have, we've got a proposer and a seconder, all of the members in favour of the new recommendation? That's unanimous. Thank you very much, members. Sorry to have taken your time up. The application has been refused, and if anybody would like to leave now, please feel free. You don't have to stay, and I will pause the meeting. Okay, members.
So we can start enjoying ourselves now.
Oh, they're going to miss out on some of the best bits of the evening. Absolutely. The best bit. So we're going to now go back to item 6, our financial management report, and I'm going to ask our local area manager, Kitty, to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. For the sake of brevity, I won't run through the recommendation, but the recommendation before members tonight is set out on page 13 of the report. Thank you.
Any questions? Councillor Broomfield.
Yeah, bins. Now, at £455 a pop, that's actually only about 21.977 bins, isn't it? So it seems like an awful lot of money for nothing, but it's about managing people's expectations because we get so many people who want bins. How do we do that? Because how do we ration them?
I can go back to Kitty, but I think it's something we need to discuss more broadly. I think Bishopstoke, Fair Oak have so many bins, and actually you can go to areas where there are no bins and there is no litter. So I find it incredibly depressing that we have not only a vast amount of bins, but that people still fail to use the ones that are right in front of them, like literally. And it just seems such a shame. We shouldn't be spending all the money that we've got on this. This is not, these aren't enhancements. Seeing a bin in your local community isn't really an enhancement. You know, I could think of lots of other things that would bring much better joy to the lives of our local residents than a bin that people refuse to use, or B, graffiti, which is another thing that they attract. So I think where the bins are located is definitely a discussion for the team meetings, and that perhaps we should actually look at whether we really need to be spending this much money on things that people should be doing. Sorry, Councillor Broomfield.
Sorry, I can't resist saying this, but maybe we need to find people who will influence people to use the infrastructure.
Thank you very much for that.
You don't have to minute that, Becky.
Is there any other? Councillor Tidridge.
I'm always really struck on the litter picks that I take part in, as do you, Lou, Karen, I'm sure the other members do as well. Just how much litter you find literally next to a bin. It is deeply depressing. I know, at the risk of going back on the terrible pun, the infrastructure of our area, I know there was some work wasn't there to plot it out, and apologies this was covered in the last team meeting, but I think it would be really good to see plotted out where the bins are in Bishopstoke, Fair Oak and Horton Heath, just to get an idea of where they all are. Because I know some are provided by the parish, some are provided by the borough. My personal highlight is around the corner from where I live on Church Road, where there's a lovely new bench and bin outside Church Road play area, and then inside the play area there's another bin. And it's just like, I don't see why we need to do that. I think we do need to have a strategic view of our infrastructure. Sorry, Stephen.
Thank you very much. Councillor Caws.
Just on that, I have heard, as probably everyone has, that bins do attract litter. And, you know, I think the world is changing, actually. I do a lot of camping, and I went camping last year, and a lot of the campsites, they don't even have bins. You can't throw what you have to take your rubbish away with you. And the same with, like, the, you know, New Forest National Park and lots of wooded areas. You take your rubbish home with you, and maybe it should be about more re-educating our community rather than taking bins away or putting bins there, but just maybe education.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Councillor Broomfield.
Moving away from bins, trees. Is the reserve that we're talking about transferring, was that £1,500? Is that actually going to be enough, given how much was spent last year? I mean, I can't imagine that we'll be spending much less for any reason. So So I'm just thinking, and do we pay, I know Eastleigh has a tree team, so that basically any trees in the Biffo area we have to pay for. So I'm not sure £1,500 is enough, is it?
So the £1,500 that's being asked for now is on top of the £7,300 that the Biffo LAC has for its for its trees annually. The figure that we've been given has been advised by the tree services team, so it should be adequate for this year. Going forward, I think we need to look at the overall annual figure that we have for trees, and that's a piece of work that we're picking up through the financial review that we're doing. But yes, I think the £1,500 for the remainder of this year is adequate.
That's what we're only talking up to the end of March.
Yes. Yeah.
Does anybody have any debate if we've finished on questions? That's all right. I've got one thing I want to say, which is regarding the allocation of money for essential tree works on Meadow Street Way, which I think this is really poor that we end up with a situation that we pick up these huge costs because a developer built a house too close to a tree. And yet we've just had an example this very evening of 3 more oak trees being in very close proximity to property. I actually think, you know, with 160,000 trees being planted and actually Bishopstoke, Cllr Oak and Horton Heath going early and actually having more, that we can't get into this situation, you know, that there needs to be a better way of handling our tree budgets. It should be a corporate borough-wide thing. What's going to happen if we have no money? We can't finance the tree works that need to be done. So I hate this one. I hate that. I know we've got to pay for it and it's essential, but it's just infuriating. Just infuriating. And again, money going on something when actually there's lots of other things that would be really good for our communities and would enhance them. And the other thing is the increase in cost in the lapstone playing, which is a real shame. But at least that is money going towards a fantastic community asset. So I'm not going to grumble about it. So with no further ado, I'm just going to say it is recommended that the committee adopts items 1 to 5. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Broomfield, and a seconder. Councillor Couldrey didn't put his paw. I thought he did. Oh, he did. Yeah. Councillor Couldrey, and all those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much. We go swiftly on. Thank you for your work on that, Kitty. On to item 7, which is our local area action plan. And again, I will ask Kitty, I believe, to present the report.
Thank you very much, Chair. Again, for the sake of brevity, the recommendations are set out on page 19 for members to consider. Thank you.
Do any members have any questions? If there are no questions, can I have a proposer, please? Councillor.
Sorry, I do have a question very quickly.
Councillor Broomfield.
Hawkley Woods, there's another tree that's come down across the path that runs along the boundary of the Whiteland playing fields. I contacted Mel at the Parish Council this morning and no reply yet. Whose responsibility is that these days?
It's something that's been raised with us by the Hampshire County Council Public Rights of Way team. The tree has come down on, or is within land that isn't in the borough's ownership. It also isn't in the parish council's ownership. It's privately owned by the Church Commissioners of England. So we are, I have asked our countryside manager to respond to Hampshire County Council, so it should be in hand.
He's a nice chap.
Any other questions? Okay, can I have the proposer? I think I Councillor Tidridge. And then can I have a seconder? Cllr Broomfield. Any debate? Councillor Tidridge.
Yes, Stoke Park Farm. Support the council in progressing proposals for Stoke Park Farm taking account of local views. I think that's the wrong way round. I think the council should be supporting BIFO Local Area Committee in progressing our proposals to improve Stoke Park Farm. Thank you.
Any other debate? Councillor Caws?
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Tidridge that supporting the local area committee, but also supporting residents and the desires of the residents. It is a question as well, because I'm kind of struggling to find I can't see Stoke Park Farm on Appendix 1. Should it be there, or is that purposeful that it's not there? Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, you can before I come back in. Carry on, Kate.
Thank you. Apologies, Chair. I would just, when you're thinking about wording for Stoke Park Farm, remember this is BIFO's document. It's your area action plan. So the word, we can't ask the council to support BIFO in this. It is what are BIFO going to do with regards to Stoke Park Farm. So just when you're thinking about alternative wording, just bear that in mind. Thank you.
So I was going to make a comment again on Stoke Park Farm. I think this committee had already voted on a motion to progress a nature reserve, and I'd like to see that reflected. And most certainly taking into account our local residents' views. So I think the wording of that project needs to change. Does Councillor Tidridge or Councillor Caws have any proposed words? I can see you both scribbling furiously. Councillor Tidridge.
Okay, happy to defer to Karen's if it's better. Progress improving Stoke Park Farm in line with this committee's ambition to establish a local nature reserve on the farm.
Could you repeat? Can you email that to
Yes, I'll just type it. I think that should be coming. Sorry, let's try that type it.
Is that going to be thrown up there on the sheet?
Hang on, I can send it to Woody.
Just email it to all BIFO.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because this is about our aspect. This is not about any strategic aspect. This is about our aspect of it, not any strategic things that might be being developed by the wider council. So this is about BIFO specifically. So I wanted to make sure it's reflected that what's in our sphere of control and what's not in our sphere of control as it's in our plan, if that makes sense.
Can I just raise one issue on this? And that is...
Can you put your microphone?
Sorry.
Sorry, Councillor.
Yeah. Can I just raise one issue? Because the current proposal, as I understand it, the ambition of the nature reserve is fine. I'm a little doubtful whether we can do it on that side, because it's not big enough, and it's a long way in the future, so let's of course take as many steps as we can. But we also have a park going onto that site, and should we not include that in the plan?
There is going to be an application for a suitable alternative natural green space, which is not the same as a park. A sang. It's a sang and not a park. They are different because sangs are governed by what Natural England set out in technically, and that hasn't yet actually been agreed in either way. It just hasn't been brought forward yet. I was expecting it at the previous count, and I was expecting it at this one. I doubt it will come to March because there are other things they're looking at. Until we've got that in front of us, I don't think that's something we can promise at the moment.
We're not promising anything.
Obviously, if the sign comes forward and it's put in, then of course it forms part of our wider view about protecting Stoke Park Farm, but it isn't here with us at this moment, whereas we have taken that other motion. Councillor Tidridge.
Just to add to that, this committee has passed motions stating our aim, our ambition for Stoke Park Farm to become a local nature reserve. So therefore I think we should reflect that. And I wouldn't want to predetermine our decision on the SANG by putting it into here, because I think we need to have a clear, we need to have a pre-undetermined mind when we're considering the SANG proposal.
Sorry, you put that much nicer than I did, which is why I'm saying we haven't got that yet. So we can't write it into our plan as such. Councillor Caws.
While I think it's important, that we do say that we want to progress it towards being a local nature reserve. The local community have also expressed wishes that there are more amenities for people to go and public to be. So while I think it's nice to have the local nature reserve wording in there, maybe we also need to add something that, we want to increase habitats for wildlife, but also not to the exclusion of the enjoyment of our community, and that we can, it's a big enough site, it's 103 hectares, it can fit at wildlife and humans, maybe something like that we could.
I think that's why we already had the words about our residents, didn't we? Was that not on?
Just local views, it says.
But we can't take a decision on the SANG going into our local area patch when we haven't got that. So.
Not the SANG, but just, that yes, we want a local nature reserve, but, we're not excluding people from going there.
But people aren't excluded from nature reserves.
No.
Okay, if we have the words working with the local community at the end of that sentence, does that give a better local community kind of perspective?
Well, we can even say supporting the council as well. There's nothing.
What does that now say?
I did the words working with the local community at the end of the sentence.
So what's the all?
Progress improving Stoke Park Farm in line with this committee's ambition to establish a local nature reserve on the site, working with the local community.
I think that sums it up very nicely. And we are the council, Karen, so so I don't think we need to add that in.
No, I think you make a really good point about making sure that that this is something that local people can enjoy and appreciate. And that's certainly something it's going to be interesting exploring that more with the SAM and also with the nature reserve discussions.
Sorry, can you, if you're going to have a discussion, can you please use your, because it is recorded.
Yes, sorry. What I was just saying was that it's going to be really nice to have this as part of our local action plan, because yeah, I really want to see a local nature reserve on the site, because I think it will work for local people. But it's going to be really interesting when the SANG eventually comes to this committee to explore all the other aspects that Councillor Caws was talking about, and also Councillor Couldrey, in terms of other ways in which people want to use the site, and making sure that the farm is an asset for the community, the human community and the wildlife community.
Yes, absolutely, and I don't disagree. And as we know, I was told quite firmly by the leader of the council at a budget meeting only 2 years ago, all decisions of Stoke Park Farm were the responsibility of this committee. And I think that's important to always remember, that if the leader says it is the responsibility of this committee, it absolutely must be. And we take that responsibility very seriously. So, are you all right with the new wording? Okay, so to enable us to vote on this matter, we need to have to accept the recommendations subject to the amendment provided by Councillor Tidridge, which he proposes and I'll second, just to make sure we've got people know that it's subject to the amendments that Councillor Tidridge put forward. All those in favour to the recommendations as amended? Marvellous, unanimous. Thank you very much. I think this leads me nicely now into saying planning appeals. Can I please ask that you note all the planning appeals that were... Councillor Broomfield, would you like to say something?
Would. 32 Bradshaw Close. Now, it must be September that we voted to reject the retrospective application for the patio. Now, I could be wrong, but I know there is a timescale within which an appeal has to be lodged. And I contacted Development Control a few weeks ago, and no such appeal had been lodged. Nothing came up on the inspector's website, but I noticed there's nothing in the agenda. So, do we have any idea, and I don't necessarily need an answer now, because I want to find out if an appeal has been lodged. If an appeal has not been lodged, has the timescale for lodging an appeal gone by, in which case, what happens next? Because obviously Mr. Galley at number 31 would rather like to know what's going on, and so would I. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sure officers will take that back for you. Okay, so are we all agreeing to note the appeals as stated on the agenda? Thank you. That leaves me lovely to finally say thank you for participating. The next meeting is due to be held again here on the 6th of March at 6:30. Thank you. Good evening. Safe travels. Bye. Thank you, officers, for your time, patience. Much appreciated.